From 13 ABC, Conklin and Company, with 13 ABC Action News anchor Lee Conklin. First, with what's happening behind the headlines. And Take 3, our panel of political analysts.
Morning, everyone. Welcome into another edition of Conklin and Company. Today in the program, the president's historic yet under-the-radar trip to Afghanistan. Newt finally out, but not necessarily really coming out endorsing Mitt Romney, although it's a lukewarm endorsement. Maribel says there's money left over. How about that? An honest-to-goodness budget surplus in Toledo. Those topics and more in Take 3 with Fletcher Word and London Mitchell today. Also, the effort to support the Harbor House through art. But first, my conversation with Ohio's Lieutenant Governor, Mary Taylor, on the economy, education, and taxes, in town this week talking with small business owners and touting something called CSI.
CSI is our common sense initiative to get rid of the red tape and bureaucracy that hurts entrepreneurs and kills jobs in Ohio. It's very simple. What it is a process. It's partly a process that every agency has to follow to make sure that we are all on the same page about understanding the impact of new rules and regulations on business, making sure that our rules help or encourage business, not stand in the way of new job creation or new businesses locating here. Make sure that our rules are as least costly to comply with as possible. Kind of this attitude of partnering with our business community rather than an attitude of just always looking for you to do something wrong. We're still going to regulate. We're still going to protect the health and safety of Ohioans and the environment. But we want to do it in a common sense way that makes sense.
Governor Kasich, before he was governor, his mantra was, we've got to get out of the way for businesses to succeed. And he continues to say that. It's about regulating or deregulating, whatever the case may be, in order to attract jobs. So what have you done as the leader of CSI to allow these businesses to move forward?
Well, we're a couple things, very specific examples. We worked with the Home Builders Association. They were working with the Department of Commerce to rewrite rules on residential building code, for example. It wasn't required to be done. It just is something that got done on a regular basis. The rules were coming at a time that was going to cost them much more money to comply, and it was going to cost homeowners much more money to comply or build a new house. So we worked with them in the Department of Commerce. They pulled the rules and went back to the drawing table and said, we know this is going to impact Ohio homeowners. Can we do this in a better or smarter way? Sometimes we get out of the way, and sometimes we improve the rule or regulation that's in process to make sure that we are regulating the particular item that we're regulating, but we're doing it in a common sense way.
Okay, taxes. I want to talk about taxes. The governor said that taxes are too high on businesses. You got to lower those taxes, but you were a mentor. This was back in November, and you took some flack from some business owners who said this use tax, where you go back and you're trying to recoup tax money from years gone by. They can't afford it. They don't have the money. How have you dealt with those issues? You're talking to Sylvania businesses this past week. So how do you deal with those issues? Well,
that issue specific to the use tax, there is an amnesty program that I believe is beginning May 15th. It's going to run for a short period of time. So businesses that owe back use taxes can file under the amnesty program. The penalty is waived and half the interest is waived. So it's an opportunity to get current on your taxes if you didn't know that you otherwise owed them, but do it in a way that encourages you to become current by getting rid of the penalty and reducing the interest, rather than waiting at some point in the future and come out and audit you and hit you with a massive penalty.
And the state still gets some of what it has coming.
It still gets all of what it has coming from a use tax perspective, and it gets part of the interest, but it just doesn't get the penalty piece.
Okay, so that's one aspect of redefining or rewriting the rules, if you will.
Right.
What are some others as you move forward, as Ohio continues to come back from this recession of 08, 09? What are some of the other things as you move forward that you're trying to implement?
Well, we just recently worked with the legislature in the budget, and we got a provision approved called Buckeyes Forever. If you graduate from an Ohio high school and you've moved out of state either to go to college or get a job, you want to go now, you're at that point in your career, in your life, you want a master's degree. Before, if you wanted to come back to Ohio, you would be charged out-of-state tuition to come back to one of our great universities and get a master's degree. Because of Buckeyes Forever, you can now come back to Ohio at any time, and you'll pay in-state tuition. So again, opening the doors and welcoming our best and our brightest back to our state rather than throwing up the roadblock and saying, we don't want you to come back. We want you to come back to Ohio and bring your talent.
And we've lost a lot of them.
Yes.
Lost a lot of them over the last decade or so. I want to talk about education because there is controversy over the governor trying to redefine or regrade school districts. And urban districts are really pushing back on this. Is that fair?
What we need to do is we need to raise the level of expectations. I think that parents need to know if their kids are learning in the schools, and they need to understand how they're being educated, and then how they can do comparisons from, say, school district to school district, state to state, country to country. We have to be educating the best and the brightest in our country because we have a global world of competition. And so I think we do have to look at ways to improve the system that we have today to make sure that we have informed parents about how their particular school district is performing. I think we have to be practical and realistic again about what our expectations are, and are we fairly measuring students, teachers, and schools based on what the expectations are, and then are we communicating that information? And you know, it's so easy to say, well, we don't like the way it's going to look on a piece of paper, so we shouldn't do it. I think what we really need to do is do what's best for our kids and make sure that we are educating the best and the brightest, not just in the country, but again in the world, because they're competing in a global environment for jobs and opportunities, and we want them to get that best opportunity right here in Ohio.
Since the defeat of Issue 2, how have you seen business opportunities or the economy grow since that defeat? It was a crushing defeat for the governor, and I mean, that was something that he really pushed. How have you seen the economy progress in the wake of that?
Well, if you think about just where we started before we took office, unemployment was over 9%. We had lost 400,000 jobs. Unemployment March a year ago was at 8.8%. Today it's down to 7.5%. We are making progress on creating jobs in Ohio. We created or retained 83,000 jobs last year with a payroll impact of over $4 billion. So we're not, not only creating new jobs, but making sure we're doing what we can to retain the good jobs in our state. Improve the economic environment so that businesses look at Ohio. We were first in Site Selection magazine last year, looking at Ohio again and saying, you know what, Ohio is a great state, and now they're improving their economic environment, so we want to move there.
I want to ask you about when you talk about the auto bailout, President Obama touting that, and that's become a source of a debate over the course of the campaign. Governor Kasich says 1,600 manufacturing jobs have been created in Ohio, but 23,000 healthcare jobs. How'd that happen?
Well, you have to look at Ohio and where we were before historically and where we're headed as a state going forward, and looking at every industry and every opportunity that the industry brings, whether it's healthcare, technology, aerospace, the new shale opportunities in the eastern part of the state, and it's really capitalizing on your strengths and reinforcing what you do well, but also shifting if the environment is shifting in a way that says we'll always be a manufacturing state, but what will manufacturing look like in Ohio in the future? And it's going to look a little different. It does look different today than it did in the past, but it's shifting and adjusting, and then trying to be proactive in the way we look for opportunities to create good jobs in Ohio.
Governor touts this tax increase on oil and gas company. You mentioned the shale drilling. It got pushback from Republicans, his colleagues, and said, I want to lower taxes for Ohioans, recoup the money that way. Where do you see this going, even with criticism from his own party?
Well, I think the legislature is going to take, as they do with any particular proposal, go through a meaningful process to make a determination about what's best for Ohio. But one thing we do know is that to make our state competitive, really, really competitive, we have to bring down the individual income tax rate. It is something that we know directly and indirectly is on the minds of business owners or those that are looking to create jobs, and they're going to look at that. So every opportunity we get to reduce the income tax is going to be an opportunity to create a new job in Ohio.
At Sylvania, speaking before the Chamber of Commerce, for example, what's the most important thing, or what do they speak the loudest to when they talk to you? Is it let us be heard as small business owners here in Sylvania, Ohio, in Northwest Ohio? What are you being told most often?
When you talk specifically about a small business owner, they really want to be heard that they're a small business owner. And we're different than the large corporations in the way that I may be micro small with 4 or 6 or 8 employees, and my needs and what it costs me to comply with rules and regulations is way different than a very large corporation. That's why we appointed a Small Business Advisory Council at our Common Sense initiative, because we recognize that small businesses are impacted differently than large businesses when it comes to complying with rules and regulations. That's a lot of what you hear from our small business community is everybody talks, this is what they'll tell you, everybody talks about paying attention to small business, but what are you doing that says to me you are? And through our Small Business Advisory Council and our new process for rules, we're asking every agency to document that they understand what they're doing impacts small business.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Mary Taylor, thanks very much for stopping in and stopping in Northwest Ohio again.
Thank you.
Nice to see you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And when we come back, you got to have hope and you got to have art. How the two come together right after this.